Welcome to this explainer. Today we are diving into a really fascinating and highly specific piece of modern religious literature. It's called the Spiritual Warfare Bible. Now, whether you're a theologian or just a curious observer of how faith communities operate, this text gives us a surprising look at how ancient beliefs are being completely repackaged for modern, everyday combat. It essentially tries to re-engineer the psychology of the everyday believer, aiming to transform them from a civilian into a soldier. So we're going to explore this text as a comprehensive, modern tool designed to equip its readers for what the authors describe as a very real, unseen battle. Let's get into it.
Right out of the gate, the core premise driving this entire project is explicitly stated. God is calling his church to a real war mentality. The authors make the case that a lot of Christians have developed this passive, rolling with the punches approach to life. They get weary, they take obstacles exactly as they come simply because they lack the basic training to confront their enemies. But here's the catch. This isn't just about reading scripture. This Bible is positioned as a 21st century training manual. The overarching goal? To make the believer fully combat ready. It's a complete paradigm shift. It asks the reader to look at every struggle not as just some random misfortune, but as a calculated attack that requires a tactical response.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll discuss a call to arms. Second, we'll look inside the Bible. Third, we'll cover the frontline features. Fourth, avoiding extremes. And finally, we'll talk about the everyday believer.
Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, a call to arms, modernizing faith.
As you might guess, the language throughout this text is steeped in heavy military metaphor, and it specifically focuses on progression. The authors point out a pretty fascinating parallel. Think about natural modern warfare. Armies don't go into battle using catapults and bows and arrows anymore, right? Sure, those worked great for centuries past, but today's armies need highly advanced modern weaponry. Well, the authors argue that this exact same evolution has to happen in the spiritual realm. Believers just can't keep using antiquated tactics against 21st century darkness. Instead, they need a major upgrade. By engaging with this text, believers are basically being inducted into a modern spiritual military. They have to embrace new truths and advanced revelations if they want to effectively combat modern opposition.
Moving right along to Section 2, Inside the Bible, the foundation.
So, what exactly is the foundation of this upgraded weaponry? Published by Charisma House, this study Bible actually uses the New King James Version as its base, anchoring all of its modern commentary in a highly respected, traditional biblical translation. And this creates a really interesting bridge between classical scripture and modern charismatic interpretation. It grounds this very contemporary, combat-oriented framework in a text that feels historic and established. It gives those new tactical strategies a real sense of ancient authority.
It's also fascinating to see just how collaborative this whole project is. The commentary and study notes aren't written by just one person. No, they're a massive compilation of insights from highly prominent, best-selling figures and leaders within the charismatic movement. You've got people like John Bevere, a massive conference speaker, Cindy Trimm, a former senator and empowerment specialist, Bill Weiss, known for his New York Times best-selling experiences, and John Eckhart, who literally oversees ministries in more than 80 nations. By gathering these incredibly diverse voices, the publisher is essentially assembling a Special Forces Command staff. They're pulling together experts from all these different tactical spiritual backgrounds to give the reader a totally comprehensive, multifaceted commentary.
That brings us to Section 3, frontline features, the study curriculum.
Now that we know who put it together, let's explore the actual toolkit. The text doesn't just hand you the scripture and say, good luck out there. It actually provides a highly structured curriculum. Scattered throughout the text are nearly 220 spiritual warfare basics. These are short, punchy, succinct tips for engaging in spiritual battles. And the authors recommend a very specific three-step process for using them. First, read one tip daily as a devotional. Second, read progressively from Genesis to Revelation so those tips are actually contextualized by the broader scripture. And third, keep a journal of your insights. Imagine treating your morning reading like a military debriefing, because that's exactly the psychological shift the authors are going for here. That journal is meant to serve as your own highly personalized training manual as you document your spiritual responses.
Let's look at how this builds into practical application. The Bible includes 21 character profiles titled Lessons from God's Warriors. The authors pull from both the Old and New Testaments to show how historical figures fought their own battles. For example, they highlight Joshua, focusing on how he had to first learn to believe in his mind that he could succeed. They look at Ruth, teaching that submission can actually be a key to redemption. But what's really surprising here is that they even include Mary, the mother of Jesus. They note how she had to overcome the urgency of the natural world to prioritize the spiritual. Framing Mary through a tactical, combative lens like that really highlights just how thorough the book's premise is. To the authors, these aren't just ancient stories. They are literal case studies in spiritual combat.
To round out the toolkit, there are two more major features. First, you have these elements called sharpening your sword, which focus on very distinct spiritual principles. Things like how to use spiritual gifts, how to understand dreams and visions, and how to sharpen your discernment. Secondly, there are specific spiritual warfare prayers. And honestly, this is where the tactical nature of the book truly shines. If a believer is facing a specific crisis, they don't have to scramble around trying to find the right words under pressure. The book provides targeted, structured prayers right there on the page. It's almost like having pre-written deployment orders, ensuring you're never caught off guard.
Next up is Section 4, Avoiding Extremes, the two dangerous ditches.
Now, with all this intense, heavy focus on warfare, you might be wondering about the psychological or theological toll this takes on a person. Well, contributor Jennifer LeClaire addresses this directly through a deeply personal and honestly fascinating account. She outlines two dangerous ditches that believers can easily fall into. The first ditch is the extreme warfare ditch. In her early faith journey, she attended a church where they were constantly on red alert, literally seeing demons, witchcraft, and the spirit of Jezebel behind every single problem. It was just a constant, exhausting zone of strife. So seeking some relief, she left and went to a totally different church. But there, she fell into the second ditch, the extreme passive worship ditch. This church just laughed on the floor and worshiped for hours, completely ignoring any real spiritual threats. They assumed God would just handle absolutely everything, and they failed to exercise any of their own spiritual authority.
So, what does this all mean? And how does the book attempt to resolve this tension? The solution, according to the text, is balance. Believers must not blame God when the enemy attacks, because God has already given them authority on earth. But at the same time, they cannot let warfare turn into a life of constant, stressful striving. The ultimate goal is to become skilled warriors and intimate worshipers. By combining the sharp, tactical discernment of a soldier with the devoted heart of a worshiper, believers can stay out of those dangerous ditches and walk effectively right down the middle of the road. It's a really interesting psychological balancing act, maintaining high alert discernment without letting it degrade into chronic stress.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Everyday Believers, enlisted in God's army.
We've seen the weapons, the history, and the strategy, but who is this actually for? The text makes a fascinating assertion based on the book of Mark, chapter 16, verses 17 and 18, which talks about casting out demons and healing the sick. The commentary insists that these instructions are not just limited to church leaders, pastors, or specific intercessors. No, they are for the everyday believer. The authors argue that the moment someone accepts this faith, they are automatically signed up for the army of the Lord. It's a total, automatic enlistment. You aren't just a member of a congregation sitting comfortably in a pew. You are actively enlisted in the special forces, and you are expected to operate on the front lines of daily life.
This concept places an immense, ultimate responsibility on the individual. The text dives deeply into the Greek word ananepho, which means to become sober again, to regain one's senses, or to recover oneself. The authors ask a really profound and emotionally weighty question here. How many people have taken arrows from the enemy and have never recovered? The theological argument they're making is that you cannot lead your home and the church cannot win the world if believers do not first recover themselves. Spiritual warfare, therefore, isn't just about fighting external darkness. It begins with profound internal healing and reclaiming your own spiritual sobriety.
Which leaves us with this final, overarching challenge presented by the Spiritual Warfare Bible. We've seen how it constructs a highly structured modern military framework for faith, complete with daily tactics, historical case studies, and a call for profound personal responsibility. It makes the case that the spiritual landscape has changed, and your tools absolutely have to change right along with it. So looking at this entire framework, the ultimate question the book leaves its reader with is simply this: are you prepared for 21st century warfare? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.